Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig Podcast. I am excited to be back here and releasing another episode. Got another great interview lined up for you guys this evening. Before we jump into that, I did want to do some updates. And first and foremost, a big celebration, a big shout out. We have reached 20 supporters, which was our first benchmark on Patreon. And I really appreciate all of those 20 supporters who are parting with some hard-earned money. I understand it's these days it's tough to stretch a dollar, but I really appreciate that. That's our first benchmark. So we have kicked off the process of building the website. Really made some great progress on that already, and that website is going to incorporate a lot of features focused only on pastured pig processing, pastured pig raising, pastured pig, everything pastured pig, basically, from a national perspective. We want to cover everything, West Coast, East Coast, everything in between. So it's going to be your resource or other people's resources. There'll actually be an element that draws in potential customers for you, for your genetics, for your weaners, for your wholes and halves, for your cuts. There's a lot of elements we're anxious to add there as we get going. So look for that soon. We'll keep you all updated. So along those same lines, what I'd like to do, with a website's all about imagery, right? So I can obviously go out and take pictures of my pigs in pasture all day long, but that's very one-dimensional. We want to show pastured pig images across the country, all the different ways that you guys have been raising pigs on pasture, all the different breeds, all your different setups. So here is a call out to you all listening. If you would like to send me any pictures or video clips that you think would look great on a website, send those to me, and we will vet those, of course, make sure it's going to work for where we need it, and we'll place that on the website, and we'll definitely give you citation reference, and we'll give you a link. And if you're familiar with SEO, the benefits of getting that backlink, there is value to that. Give you a link to your website, to your social media, whatever you have available there. And it'll be just a great way to get some exposure for a great pick that you've taken, but then also give us an opportunity to have a great eclectic representation of pastured pig setups across the country. Now, in keeping with all the copywriting and all those type of things, please make sure that this is indeed your picture, that you didn't grab one off Google Images and send it to me. We will be confirming that with Google, but I'll also need to have you just sign a standard guest bloggers agreement, which is just boilerplate language, basically saying you didn't plagiarize anything, images, text, whatever. So don't let that scare you, but that's what we marketing people have to do. We have to dot our I's and cross our T's. So by all means, please consider sending that. You can send a high-res image to troy@redtoolhouse.com, or if you have any questions, obviously just email me at troy@redtoolhouse.com. So along that same line, if you have been a guest on our podcast already, either reach out to me or expect to get an email from me here soon. We want to feature you on the website as well. So those of you that have come on and shared your experiences with us through the podcast that we could share with the listeners, then look for some information. We want to kind of update where you are, products you offer, those type of things. So we want to do a little shout out for each of you that have been on the podcast. So look for that, or go ahead and be proactive and send me your information as well. So along the same lines of Patreon, since we've been talking about that, we now have 4 detailed episodes diving deep into how to market your farm products, specifically your pastured pork products. We start from the very beginning, from pricing all the way to how to start marketing campaigns when you have very little money, guerrilla marketing efforts, those type of things. So there's 4 episodes now behind the Patreon firewall there, paywall. So if you're a Patreon member, you can use that. There's an RSS feed that all you do is drop that into your mobile device and it'll download it just like it downloads the podcast. So it's that automatic. If you have any questions or you have any issues with that, by all means, email me and I can give you step-by-step instructions on how to set that up. Our next benchmark with Patreon is 40. So if we can get to 40, then there's a really cool feature that we want to turn on the website. It has a monthly cost associated with it. So that's why we're setting that to that next benchmark. But it will be a nationwide directory that is indexable, has just an incredible amount of features. So whether you're selling wholes and halves just in your region or you're selling genetics nationwide, then it'll have this regional appeal that we can represent. Place your farm information on there, place your product information, your genetics, your products that have to deal with pastured pigs, whatever you've got, then we'll be able to share that. And that at that point, too, we'll also be spending some monthly advertising dollars to get the website promoted, to try to get SEO built up there, and to get regular traffic of legitimate visitors that will utilize these products and services that you guys offer. So look for that on down the road as well. Hopefully when we get to that 40 threshold, looks like that may take us a year plus. Maybe not. Maybe it moves quicker, but that's the goal when we hit 40. All right, so let's get in and talk about our guest. Our guest is Ryan, and I slaughtered his last name. And Ryan, I'm going to apologize in advance, even though you gave it to me phonetically. I still have slaughtered it. But it's Ryan Kolodziej, and it doesn't spell anything like it sounds. But Ryan, I really enjoyed talking with Ryan. He's with Epic Nature out in Wisconsin. And we had some really good discussion about his Red Wattles, how he's raising breed stock. Kind of took a little bit of a detour into his Red Wattle Association, some other things he's got going on. He's a wealth of information, and I like the way he presents that. So we're probably going to have Ryan back on future episodes to dive deep into some of these specific details that we touch upon in the podcast episode. So without any further ramblings, I'm going to jump on over to our interview, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side of the interview as we wrap up with some other details. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Troy McClung, and I have another great interview set up for us tonight. Really looking forward to talking to Ryan. And I already apologized to Ryan in advance because I was going to butcher his last name. Appalachians and European names, they don't mix very well. But I want to welcome to the podcast Ryan Kolodziej. And Ryan's with Epic Nature in Wisconsin. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks, Troy.
All right, so I hope I didn't butcher your name too badly there, but man, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and talk about what you've got going on up there in Wisconsin.
Yeah, not a problem. We're just doing a rural type hobby farm up here in Wisconsin. We've had pigs up here pretty much since we moved out here about 20 years ago. But we've kind of shifted to having purebred Red Wattles. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, let's do this. If you don't mind, give me whereabouts in Wisconsin. I don't know much about Wisconsin. Where are you close to? Are you close to the Canadian border? Are you further south?
Wisconsin doesn't actually touch the Canadian border, interesting enough.
Well, this shows you what I know. That's right, because of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan blocks it, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we have Lake Superior.
Yeah.
So that keeps the Canadians out, I guess.
Oh, man, I feel like an idiot now. I'm going to have to brush up on my geography. Woo.
So Amherst, Wisconsin, it's pretty much centrally located. We're in growing zone 4A for all you temperature people out there, which means it's 20 below on a few nights, and sometimes it gets a little bit colder than that.
Yeah, wow.
So the wind chills in central Wisconsin do approach that 45 to 55 below zero. So our location in Wisconsin does kind of make it an issue with winter farrowing. And I'm sure all the other farmers out there know that weather is a farmer's best friend. And we breed year round because we found that it can be 40 degrees in January and 20 below in March. So there's no use trying to guess on the weather. Just got to keep them bred.
Yeah, exactly. Just embrace the suck, I guess. So in that area of Wisconsin, is that, would you consider that like a plains area? Is that rolling hills? Is it mountainous?
The majority of Wisconsin is a rolling type of hill with fertile soil. So the lower 2/3 of the state are actually some of the best cropland. I mean, it's really similar to Iowa and Illinois. I don't think the bushel yields are quite the same. I think that they are approaching 200 bushels an acre on some of that southern Wisconsin farmland. So it's pretty good soil. Where we are is the break between what is called the terminal moraine. The glacier stopped there and left a bunch of piles of dirt that are a couple 100 feet tall. So we live in a terminal moraine. So the soil around us is known as glacial till. So you can have clay and a vein of clay in one spot and then all sand in another, where you can't get a pricker bush to grow. And it's literally just a pile of sand.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's got to make things interesting. So
we try to use the variety of soils to our advantage. You know what I mean? If we got a spot that's flat, where we have a lot of our pigs, it's a 20-acre field, which is really flat. But once you come off of that, there's a sandy hill on another part of the property. I've been hauling that sand up to put in the pastures for the pigs wherever I'm moving my farrowing huts to, because we move our farrowing huts at least every year, if not every farrowing.
Oh, wow. Excellent. So a little bit real quick about the history of the farm. In your pre-screen info, you had mentioned that this is a fourth generation in your wife's side of the family. So real quick, give us a little bit of a history there as to the layout of the farm, how you guys came about it, and then what the four generations, what was it primarily used for?
Well, originally this was, I guess, timberland sold to another pioneer family in the late 1800s. So the original owners of this property after the sawmill was another family until my wife's great grandparents bought it back in, I don't know if it's the late 1800s or the early 1900s or exactly what. I've never seen the deed, but it was a long time ago that they bought the property. So it's been used as kind of a hobby farm because of the terrain, where there's a creek running through it. There's a lot of wetlands. It's a 110-acre total farm, which my wife and her brother share ownership of it at this point. But at least half of it is in either some sort of conservancy zoning or rural limited natural area, which is a buffer zoning that our county has.
Oh, that's interesting. So how does that work into managing your efforts? Do you find that as limiting, or do you see that as a bonus because some of these things, these areas are kind of returning back to more of an original or a renewed state? How do you guys approach that?
Well, living in a natural area is a blessing. You can't have the type of life that we have without. There's wildlife everywhere. We have different types of herons in the creek. Fishing. We've got otters. We've got mink. We got all kinds of wildlife in our area, and to maintain that, you have to allow the government to put restrictions on you and send you letters. So it's a pain. Living this close to water is a real pain, but it's a blessing. So, as a farmer, it's very, very difficult to do any sort of commercial or industrial scale farming this close. And that's why we've kind of decided on pasture raised pigs and keeping all the pigs out, because we cannot store or stack manure. We are too close to a watershed to even store or stack manure on our property.
Interesting. So, I'd like to unpack that for a little bit, if you don't mind. So, were you saying as you and your wife were coming to the property and looking about, hey, we want to utilize this as the farmland that it was, we want to do some sort of agriculture with it, were you thinking more of an industrial scale, but because of this situation and what you had around you and recognizing the conservation that's going on, that's maybe what led you into this pastured pigs, or were there other influences there?
Well, I hope you don't mind me taking a tangent on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
When we came to this property, it was in 2002 when we first were married. We got married in 2001, and we were given a piece of this property that we have our house on right now as a wedding present. So we've been out here for a long time, but not until Deanne's grandmother passed in 2011 did the property actually get divided up proper between the living children. And since my wife's mother was an only child, there was no distribution of land at that generation. It went straight past my mother-in-law, who just didn't have any use for it. She's in her 70s, and passed it straight on to the next generation, which is an excellent way for a farm to continue being successful.
Yeah.
Certain people should not be hanging on to their farmland and holding it over their children's heads for something. Give them the farmland so that they can actually do something with it while they're young.
Yeah. Well said.
So we have had an excellent opportunity working with my wife's parents and brother so that we can use this property to really its full potential. When we got here, the tillable acreage was being tilled by a local farmer that rents for row crop. He just does corn and beans rotation. Mm-hmm. So the property was under corn and beans rotation for over 30 years before we got here. Commercially, I didn't see row crop as viable. So we had to convert the 20 acres of tillable land we had into something that we could use. So it was a very difficult journey. We failed at a lot of different things trying to convert this property into something that doesn't require, for one, industrial or commercial input to keep it going. Because there's no way that a small farm can compete with, commodities. I can't produce corn or soy or hay or anything like that. Just the machinery alone on a little farm like this would eat up all the profits.
Right.
So pasture raising pigs. I don't know. Everyone else is doing pasture raising steers. There's a lot of dairy in Wisconsin, so I'm competing with a lot of guys that have literally free bull calves. So we weren't going to pasture raise steers. We're going to do pigs. And it just seemed to fit together that pigs were going to kind of nurture the land and turn it back wild. Yeah.
Wow, man, I love the evolution of that journey and appreciate your perspective on that. And kudos to you all for taking a look at that and going through that step by step. Now, it sounds like there may have been some hard lessons learned in that process with what you mentioned there, but it's really neat to evaluate and come to that realization that here's what we need to do, and this is what's going to separate us from competition, but also make us viable even though we're a small acreage farm. Very cool.
About small acreage farms, and I see a lot of this in central Wisconsin, that these guys lose their farms. They take on debt to fuel this appetite for commodity. the more corn you can grow. All right. So I've got to reduce my hours. I got to buy a bigger tractor. I got to buy a bigger plow, everything. So you're constantly putting all of your money back into allowing yourself to just get bigger. And the inputs are incredible for an acre of corn. Mm. I mean, it'd be a couple $100 at least per acre on inputs. So on a 20-acre section, it's $4,000 every year, and that if you're doing it right, it's going to cost you more than that. And that's just to get going every spring, that you have to come up with this cash roll to put your crops in. Whereas with pasture, you can start with 4 or 5 pigs, 4 or 5 sows, get them going, get some litters, sell the litters, buy more feed, add a sow, and just slowly grow your herd by selling off what you can to grow it.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, slow growth model there in many ways. So have you discovered with, I assume, first of all, how many years do you have pigs on that 20 acres, and where have you seen that 20 acres improve to?
Well, we started with 4 pigs, 4 crossbred sows. They were a Yorkshire, Hampshire cross, and we bought a registered Duroc boar, and they were averaging, probably weaning 9 out on pasture on the litters, and they were really fast growing. But the sow's fertility expired after three generations, and we had problems with stuck piglets. So immediately after we had our first litter, I started looking for something better. And we found Red Wattles. And I say found them, it's just research. You got to do your research. If you're going to do anything successfully, you've got to know what everyone else is out there doing, what everyone else has done wrong. Pasture raising animals, you can't have a commercial breed. You need something that has been out on pasture for generations. It's one of the hardest lessons I learned about, just durability, longevity. The heavy pigs, the heavy frame pigs on ice, out on rough terrain, they're not built for that. You need an animal that has just a little bit more of a petite stance to it so that it can be more agile.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I gotta say,
there's so much that I want to cover in this interview. It's like how do you tell pretty much how you got your whole operation running in a short little.
Right. Yeah, become a challenge, definitely. Man, I appreciate what you're sharing with us there. And I can definitely agree, and in my experience, started with very similar Hampshire Duroc mixes, finished well, but very similar situation. The genetics kind of ran out, and they were just really hard on our pasture. It's way more mountainous. It was been a real challenge to keep that heavier breed on the hillside. So we've switched to more of a heritage breed as well. So, well, excellent.
And I'm glad that you say that in a mountainous area, you definitely need something more fleet of foot, or they're going to be rolling down the hills all the time.
That's right. Yes, there's a couple times I saw Hampshires hit the hill, and they don't stop till they get to the bottom because they're kind of barrel chested. Well, all right. So I have to ask your experience. So at this point, when you all decide to come to the farm to do this, to embrace pigs, is this a career move? Is this something that generationally you've had experience, or you started out with you grew up on a farm? Where were you in the experience there, and why? What led you to the farm life if it wasn't?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people in Wisconsin grow up with rural exposure. Somebody owns a farm. Somebody's family owns a farm. Everybody owns 40 acres for hunting, even if it's not farmed. All the marshlands, all the woodlands, that's all owned by these families that grew up here. They're outdoorsmen. They want their own place to go and shoot a turkey or a deer or whatever. So you have a lot of rural culture in Wisconsin. And I think it permeates in Wisconsin more than it permeates in almost any other state by the way that I'm treated when I go out of state. When I'm pulled over by police officers, they're like, "You're from Wisconsin." Like it's something they were told that if you meet one of those guys, they don't follow any rules.
Very good.
It's very hillbilly-esque.
Yeah.
Wisconsin. It is very, very remote, and people have their own opinions, real own strong opinions from place to place. But in general, it's a community, and we all. If you break down on the road, you can knock on the first house you get to, and that guy will provide you with a jack, and he'll come out and help you take your tire off. I mean, you don't have to be afraid of who you're talking to or where you're stepping or even where you're trespassing. No one's going to shoot you for trespassing.
Good stuff.
So
you grew up in that climate, it sounds like.
I grew up on a 120-acre stretch of farmland that was purchased by my grandfather. It was not connected to the main part where he milked the cows and had all his steers and equipment and stuff like that. It was 4 miles down the road. And eventually that property was owned by my uncle, but my father's house was on it. And I grew up in that house, which was built new in 1980. It was a earth home, kind of crazy for the time, that you got a hillbilly getting cement and covering it with dirt so he can live in the side of a hill.
Right.
And, the neighbors, they always had a still, there was always moonshine available in the neighborhood, so it had a very, very rural, turn of the century feel growing up out there, remote. All the farms had outhouses. I mean, everyone had running water, but there was still all the outhouses that all the guys used, So it was a very, the place of where I grew up is, I see it as almost, pioneer, that the generations, only a couple generations ago, those men were still breaking that land and turning it into cropland. Yeah. It was all rocks and trees. My grandfather owned a bulldozer just for pushing rocks out of the fields. So, and you come to Wisconsin, it's a glacial deposit, meaning the glacier run over a bunch of mountains, and then it left its deposits right here.
Right.
So you go out in the field, and it becomes really expensive if you go too deep, because you start hitting the side of these huge rocks, size of your car.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. That you just the way you describe Wisconsin sounds a lot like West Virginia. Sounds like we could be kindred states there. That's what we love.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, Ryan, let's shift gears a little bit here. So moving on to the farm that was monocrop to some degree, and of course has this conservation element. It sounds like there may have not been a lot of infrastructure when you guys came there. Was there a house? Did you put a house on it? And then when it came to raising your pigs, did you have to put much infrastructure in, or are you staying totally mobile with your pasture operation in that sense?
Totally mobile is, having those T25 head deck screws, plywood, and a bunch of 2x6s. And wherever the sow goes, you follow her with 3 sheets of plywood and a couple 2x4s. Right. When she has her babies, you put the shelter up because that's where she chose. And if you put that thing up a second before she farrows, she ain't going in there. So that's my farrowing infrastructure. In the winter, it's different. They settle down pretty good in the winter. But the infrastructure is non-existent because it was rented land for so many years. The house that Deanne's grandfather grew up in, so the house that her great grandparents bought, sits down right by the creek. It's a cute little white house, and that was sold after Grandma's passing. My in-laws own another house, which is like 1,000 square feet or 1,200 square feet up on the hill, which is exactly 140 away from our house, because that's the minimum distance you need to have between you and your in-laws. And we built essentially a barn kit. The local, can I say Menards? I mean, can I say it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So went down to Menards. We bought a barn kit, all the metal, all the trusses and everything. It was like $24,000. And I believe it was a 30 by 36, and it's got a full barn loft. So almost the entire upstairs is usable, but it's got that, I don't know if it's a gambrel or, whatever the hip, it's got that.
Yeah, that extra barn shape. Yeah. Cut to, yeah, I believe that's, gambrel is the proper term, I believe. Yep.
So we maximized our space on that. We built the barn kit. We ended up with 1,600 square feet for our house. And we had to put a well in, all that other stuff, and build a garage. So to get set up out here, we had to go to the bank and borrow a little bit of money, but we inherited the land.
Yeah.
So that gives us a leg up on everyone else that's trying to do something like this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're trying to duplicate what I was doing or what we did out here, you'd have to build a much smaller building, the smallest house that you can build wherever your zoning lets you.
Yeah. Yeah.
If someone's going to do an off the grid, move up to Wisconsin, buy 10 acres, it could be done and be sustainable. You're not going to make any money at it, but you won't lose any money.
Yeah. Very good.
Fencing's a big deal. Biggest thing we learned about fencing is hot wires work until they don't. And if you want to keep pigs, you need to build a real fence. So we buy a woven wire. You buy these 330-foot rolls of metal woven wire. You can buy them 48 inches tall. I've been cutting those in half and making them 24s, because the 48, the tall roll, isn't any more expensive than the 32-inch roll. So why would I buy a 32 when I can buy a 48, cut in half, and have 2 rolls of wire?
Interesting. Yeah.
So I doubled all my wire, which helps me fence in quite a bit more. And we started with probably 2 acres, and then we had 5 acres because we were slowly adding replacement gilts as we could afford to. Always selling all of our babies for breeding stock, and whichever ones didn't make breeding quality, selling them for feeders. We didn't have the luxury there were no extra piglets for us to raise to eat because we're trying to move the business along. So it's about, I need cash flow. I have a litter of babies. What do? Well, I sell them all because I need the cash. And that was how we got into raising for breeding stock and for feeders, because it's like, well, this is the market we've developed. We had people in the area. They'd buy 2, come back for 4. All of a sudden they want 8. We got a lot of guys around here that they come get 10 piglets every spring, and they were guys just growing 2 or 3 for themselves.
Yeah.
But now they've got a little bit better heritage quality pork. Their friends and relatives are like, hey, that's better than what anyone else is growing. And I'm not saying that Red Wattles are hands and feet above another breed, but they definitely have a more fat distributed structure than any of your commercial hogs. It's a matter of breeding.
Yeah.
The commercial hogs are bred for production. They muscle up very quickly, and the fat just can't get in there because it's so much muscle. Any heritage breed will do exactly what I'm doing up here. It doesn't need to be Red Wattles. It could be Mulefoots. It could be the Sabwa Island, if I'm saying that correct.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people around here, they've grown I've seen the Gloucesters. I've seen the Mangalitzas. It has to do with market. And I believe that the Red Wattle hog grows at an acceptable rate that I can sell it to someone that's used to yielding pigs, high yielding pigs, they might be mad at me when they go to butcher and it's light, you know.
Right.
At the end of the first season that they buy them from me, they might be like, these damn things don't grow. But give them 6 months, and they're gonna be calling you in the spring saying, hey, can I get a couple more of them pigs?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Usually, like you say, the proof is at the butchering point. That's what we ran into when we switched over to large black Tamworth cross. Then didn't finish as heavy, but what the customer feedback was like, oh my goodness, that pork chop was way better than the pigs that you had last year, which would have been our Hampshire Duroc cross. And so we see that, and actually in our situation where we're raising for finishing, it was a little bit easier on people's wallets to say, okay, you're not raising a finishing weight or hanging weight of 250 pounds to 290 pounds. It's a little bit less than that, and they can afford it better, so, and better quality.
So I'd like to argue with you about that.
Okay.
I think we've got our first disagreement.
All right, let's hear it.
So we were 2 years into raising red wattles, and we had yet to butcher. People had asked us about how's the meat. I said, well, I had a pork chop from the guy I bought these from 2 years ago. You know?
Yeah.
Where do you buy pasture-raised red wattle pork? I mean, it's not like I could just go and buy some and be like, I want to see what this tastes like.
Sure.
I had to go and find breeding stock to have my own pork chop. And there is a funny story about how I tried to start with mulefoots. That was going to be our breed, is the mulefoot. And I could not find a breeder that would talk to me or return my phone call. It was ridiculous. I called all over the country, and I couldn't find a single person to return my phone call and sell me breeding stock.
Interesting.
So I found a guy in Wisconsin and bought 6 gilts from him, 3 of which turned out to be infertile. So I don't know if it was just the way that he had raised them, or if he hadn't been selecting for anything. And there was a lot of infertility in there. And that I fed my girls good, and I thought that I was waiting to 300 pounds like for a commercial sow. And I realized, man, a 300-pound red wattle is a little bit fattier.
Yeah.
And that they went beyond, and I couldn't get them back. That I raised them too quick, they got too fat, and now I can't bring them back down to the right weight to get them bred. Another hard lesson learned.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
Don't overfeed your breeding stock. That's why we feed 12% feed. And I feed once a day. All my breeding stock, they all get fed once a day, and they get 12% protein. They've got to find the rest of it out there in the pasture.
That's interesting.
Which is an extra large pasture. We try and put like 2 to 3 sows per acre.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Is kind of the maximum. But most of the time, like there's 5 acres in front of our house, there's 6 sows out there. But I wanted to move everyone out because they were all bred, and I had 6 litters of piglets running around in a 5-acre field. And I'm like, there's going to be way too much chaos with any more pigs than that out here. Where were we?
No, that was good. No, I agree with everything you said there. It is interesting to see the transition and between the more the production breed stock and then moving over to the heritage. There's, I guess you could say, there's pros and cons to both. But what I saw with the turnaround when I was producing a lighter pig. Because at the same point, I was at 6 to 7 months, I was getting a much heavier hanging weight with the Hampshire Duroc cross, and in that same time frame, I was getting a lighter hanging weight with the large black Tamworth cross. But I was getting good feedback from my clients saying this is much better quality pork.
I got off on a tangent about how I didn't get to eat any of my pork,
right.
So I don't know anything about butcher weights.
Yeah. Okay. I got you.
When it comes to raising a hog, I know nothing about the correct butcher weight for a red wattle because I haven't done it.
Right.
I can tell you the animals that I have butchered have most been in hanging weights of 400 to 500 pounds.
Yeah, because you're not just you're culling sows at that point, correct?
That is all cull sows.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
that's a big pig.
yeah,
yeah.
And I don't think that I overfeed them on the quality, the protein.
Mm-hmm.
And they do forage an incredible amount. And this leads me to researching about forages, about why clover has so much lysine and protein, and you can get those bigger pigs. The lightest pig that we butchered was a 300 hanging weight. Mm. And she was a 1-year-old gilt that didn't breed. And her pork chops, I don't know if I sent you any pictures.
No.
But I post this picture of this pork chop all over Facebook when everyone is asking for a pig. All these different size people are looking for pigs.
Right.
Yeah. And I only do it if someone's asking for a heritage breed of pig. Because then I know that they're interested in quality. And I post a picture of that pork chop, and then I start getting kind of a little bit of hate mail. That there's people start following and being like, Ryan's there with his pork chop again.
Right.
It is ideal for a heritage breed to go to 300 hanging weight so that your pork chops resemble a porterhouse steak.
Right.
And the eating experience is, people spend money on eating experience. We don't have a lot of restaurants around us, but the ones that, we do, they've got really good food. These people cook really well, but I ain't dropping $100 every weekend to go out to no dinner. I ain't going to pay that. But the average person might do that once a month, or even worse, that they're out there doing that every weekend. They can afford a premium on their pork. And if your freezer is filled with pork like that, you're going to eat a lot more pork. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't the heritage breeder, the pasture raised guy, be out there trying to overachieve on the quality of his product, no matter what the cost? So his product cannot be confused with anything in a freezer case. Does that?
Oh yeah. No, that makes sense, definitely. And like you say, it really comes back to your customer base and understanding, like you say, that eating experience customer base. And that's the education process, I think, that comes in. And we talk about this all the time on the podcast, where people are like, hey, I'm getting into this, but I can't compete with our supermarket because they're selling pork chops at this. And we always discuss, well, that's not your market. You're not trying to get the box store supermarket customer. You're trying to get somebody who appreciates the product, appreciates how it's raised, and appreciates something that tastes, looks, feels, everything. It just is superior product. So don't try to compete with those 99 cents a pound pork chops that you see in the supermarket.
So I guess I'm going to give it away for free. I'm going to tell everyone the secret to making this happen, because everyone's out there trying to sell their ideas. I don't think I should name any names of these guys, but there's a lot of guys out there trying to sell their image.
Sure.
Be like me. I'm pasture guy this, and I'm, sustainable guy that, regenerative agriculture. Those are all worthwhile endeavors. But what they're selling is not something that is a profitable business model. The profitable business model is what each person can do locally. And number one, you got to have the breed. You got to have the right breed that is going to set itself apart from your other products, because you're not competing with them. You're going in the opposite direction as far as you can, and make something that looks, when they see your pork chop, they're like, I've never had a pork chop like that. Well, what is people's impulse? They're going to buy it and try it. Right. You get them hooked. They have it once and like, man, this is great. I don't care that it cost me $10 for a pork chop, because they're going to go out on Friday night and dump $100 at the supper club. The next after breed is feed. You got to research the right feed so that your animal is building its frame and its muscle and its fat all together at the same time. Getting that fat marbled like that, I don't think it's rocket science. I think you just have to let your animal grow at the most comfortable pace it can as quickly as possible. And a low protein feed does that. You're not building excess muscle, but you have to have the right amount of the amino acids. You know, the feed is a tricky part. That is where everyone gets hung up. They go and buy the feed that comes in the store, and it's not designed to raise a heritage pig. It's designed to raise a bulky, muscly pig that is not very tasty. So don't buy that feed. You need to go and get corn that's grown locally, barley that's grown locally, stuff that has not had chemicals sprayed on it. It doesn't have to be organic, just that you can't have Roundup sprayed on your grains if you want your animals to grow as best as possible. You need breed, you need feed, and then you need to keep the environment as stress-free as possible. And I don't care which heritage pig you pick, that meat will be better than any meat anyone's ever had. No stress. Not a lot of animals in your area. Don't be mixing different age groups. People always mixing different pigs together, and everyone's losing an ear or an eye or some damn thing. It's like, that is not helpful to your end product.
Right. Yeah. Hostile environment for certain.
Yeah. So keep your age groups separate. You know, grow them up as one crew. They have to have forage. Your animals must have forage. If it's drought, if it's winter, I buy baleage, actual clover fields, cut, chopped, and wrapped in plastic. It smells like food. When you open it up, if you open up a bale, you'll have pigs jumping through the fence after it.
Right.
No joke.
Yeah.
Just take a handful of something like that into a confinement area and throw it in there for a bunch of those pigs. They'll be losing ears and eyes over it. Animals must have that forage all the time if you want them to grow right. And then I don't know what it is about dirt. My brother used to feed me a lot of dirt, and I think I turned out pretty good. And I've noticed that my pigs, if I don't move that farrowing area, the little babies put their nose in dirt immediately.
Yeah.
It's like the first thing that goes in their mouth before they even suckle on their mother is they're flopping around back there, putting their nose in the hay and the dirt. There's something about clean dirt that makes your animals, as it starts to rain here, I'm sitting in the car.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Fresh dirt. I can't explain it.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
You might lose me because it's about to storm here. Are we? Here, you're off speakerphone now, but it might get loud. I moved to the car for better reception, but now it's going to storm like crazy.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, if we need to cut it short, we definitely can, but we'll keep going. Sound quality's solid on this side.
All right.
So, okay. So, wow, there was a lot that you explained there and a lot to unpack, and I really appreciate your insight on some of those key elements you need to raise a quality product. Well, let me ask you something with that, in the same lines of that. So when you started getting into pigs and raising these, you'd mentioned that you're kind of keeping the cash flow going, keep the business model going. So that's why you were selling your piglets for breeding stock, and then some would be kind of called out for feeders. So is that just the genesis of that, and you just ran with it? Say, hey, I've got a model here. There's growth, there's demand, and we're just going to run with this and not try to finish any hogs. Did you come to a point where you said, I'm not going to finish anything out for people to eat? This is going to be the core of our model right now.
Well, I guess we didn't go through my whole childhood about growing up on a 200 head dairy operation. All the meat that I ever ate growing up was all old, tough cull cows.
Right.
So the profitable business model is you eat what you can't sell for a premium. And for anyone else that wanted meat, we're calling a sow. All right, there's going to be 300 pounds of meat off of this pig. So we would just kind of tell people, hey, there's going to be 300 pounds of meat available. Well, we butchered a couple ourselves, and then it's like there's a butcher shop, 10 minutes away, and they almost always have openings. There's butcher shops all over Wisconsin. I don't know if people don't have that where they are, but I've got 5 different little butcher shops within an hour drive of me.
Yeah, wow. It's nice.
So I was just like, hey, for $250 or $300, whatever they charge, they will kill it, gut it, hang it, cool it, cut it, fry it, and then I just frozen in my coolers. And I'm like, man, I couldn't do all that in a long weekend. For $250 or $300, that's cheap. Just pay to have it done. So the cull sow meat ended up being fantastic. So we don't have a reason to raise other pigs because we're constantly culling. And I guess that works into raising breeding stock, that you're going to cull a lot of sows, like 50%. Like, it is held pretty true that every year half the sows I start the year with, they don't make it to the end of the year.
So what is your threshold there? It sounds like you definitely have a checklist or a process that you go through and say, these are in, these are out. Would you mind elaborating that?
No, I can't. There's some things that if you're doing it right, it's a personal connection you have with animals, because no one else could come there and see what you see. That I can see the different lines of my sows in the herd, and I know exactly whose pig is whose pigs, and someone else come out to be like, they're all red pigs to me. So I know whose babies are doing what, and because I'm out there all the time, every day, it's just obvious. She did not overachieve. And when you're doing a breeding program, you're looking for overachievers, and she has to be a smart pig. She has to know everyone's name. She's got to know my name. She's got to understand exactly what's going on at all times. She's got to be calm. Her babies are going to be calm. And by selecting for animals that work good in my system, it makes my system work better. It's not about productivity, that how many pounds of meat can that sow produce, or how big are her loins, or all the other criteria that someone else would be selecting for. I am selecting for a whole animal that works best with me as an individual.
Interesting. So I guess just to kind of summarize, you're saying that this intimacy that you have with your pigs allows you to understand more of the holistic characteristics of each individual sow, and that allows you to make that choice and separate who needs to be separated.
Yes, to summarize, but it's what's required to separate a good pig from a great pig.
Ah, very good.
Because there's a lot of good pigs out there. Everyone's got good pigs, and even average pigs are useful. I don't mind having an average pig around to have a litter for me, but I don't think I need her to have 2 litters for me. So I'm worried too much about having average pigs in my herd, just that unless I've got a shortage of animals or someone's looking for a very average animal, then they don't get to stay around.
Wow.
And the ones that are around, I've got one of my 6 original pigs that was born November of 2015. So she's about to be 6 years old, and she is bred. Nope, she's not bred. She is to be weaned off of her 10th litter.
goodness. Wow.
And she is a happy pig, and she watches everything. When I go out to feed and I take a bucket of feed, which I feed on plywood out in the pasture, so I'm not automatic feeding these pigs. I go out there once a day, feed my pigs. They all get a little bit of that interaction with me, not like I'm stopping and petting all the pigs, but they bump into me. They see me with the bucket. It's where an automatic feeder, they don't have that connection that you bring them the food every day.
Right. Absolutely.
She will watch. Like this pig will just be laying down. All the pigs jump up. It's feeding time. She lays there and watches. I mean, she lets all the chaos happen. and then like, I'll come back, and then she'll look at me and do this like thing with her head, like, I'm sitting right here, Ryan. Give me some food.
After all I've done for you.
So she has me trained that after I'm done with all the other chores, I come and give her food by herself.
Very good.
So, I mean, it's one of those things. When you got a lot of pigs, you start to know differences. When you have just two pigs, it's really hard to know how good of a pig they are because there's nothing else to compare it to.
Yeah. That's good. Very, very good point. Yeah, it's tough to have a control in a study group when there's just two people involved in that situation. So I have to ask. So with what you're managing here, I believe in your pre-screening. I think you said that you're upwards of 30 some breeding. Let me look here. Yeah, 29 adult breeders, 26 sows, 5 boars currently. So, what tools are you using to manage that? I mean, is that all in Ryan's head, or is there a spreadsheet somewhere, or is there a farm book in the back pocket? How are you managing that, all those genetic lines?
Well, I've got the help of the registry. Registry keeps track of all the pedigree stuff, but we do have different lines for different generations in different pens. So all of Buckeye was our third boar from Jim Meyer out in Ohio. All of Buckeye's line, we kept 20 gilts from it's been this time last year. It was last June, July, and August, I think, or June and July. But those 20 girls, there's only 12 left on the farm. So they all have their litters, which I have their litters all weaned out. I've got a huge pen of piglets where a number of breeders from all over the country all have kind of spoken for us. So we've got to go for a little tour day, lower 48, and deliver a bunch of breeding stock.
Wow. Yeah.
And because of the selection process where you have these different lines, I can take something out of Buckeye's line and then go over and take something out of, Lime's line, or, the Heliopsis was one of our original pigs, and she was our fastest grower. But that also meant she was kind of the meanest pig. So her line, while it is very productive, is not as easy to work with.
Right.
So we have all these different pens, and it's like we refer to them as that's Lime's line or Heliopsis' line, in that pen.
Yeah, good deal. Man, there's thousands of questions that come into my head, but I'm not going to keep you all night. And in fact, I appreciate the time that you spent discussing this with you. So I want to kind of wrap up with a couple questions, if we could. One is what do you see in the next 5 years? If you're sitting down and you're discussing kind of a 5-year plan, where do you see your operation in 5 years from now?
I think that I keep myself overbooked on just about everything that I do. So, there's a lot of stuff that I would like to see in 5 years that I know will never happen. Right. But part of running a successful business is to have an overachiever mentality. That your projections, you should always be projecting just a little bit beyond your reach, so that when you get up in the morning, you're like, man, I got to get these pigs grown, so that it rained last night. And I've got two groups they're all from the same generation, but they're a couple weeks different. And I want to get them all mixed together so that when they go off to their new homes, everyone's kind of active. So I've got these two that I mixed, and they weren't sitting by each other yet last night when the storm rolled through. So there I am last night after the storm rolled through, trying to put some hay out in the middle of the field where 12 piglets decided that's where they're going to sleep for the night because they don't want to be by the other pigs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
There's definitely some commitment involved in projecting, where you're going in 5 years. I'd be happy with being successful doing right what I'm doing right.
Very good.
But there's a lot of ambition to improve the breed. As I'm breeding, that hopefully I don't have to do anything extra other than do a good job of looking at my pig and only selecting the best breeders so that I have a better herd for myself and a better herd for anyone else that's getting breeding stock. I do have ambitions on, getting other people started in Red Wattles, being part of the Red Wattle community. I wouldn't mind being, more involved in that in 5 years. And I wouldn't mind adding a couple other heritage breeds to the farm, especially some of the more rare ones, so that I can have a very unbiased opinion, or when I can tell people what is the right pig for their operation, that I have a little bit better idea of how each breed functions on different people's properties. And I could even recommend, hey, this guy's doing exactly what you want to do. You should be buying pigs from him, because that's how people should start out. You should go and find someone that is doing exactly what they're doing. And I wouldn't mind trying to help other people network, in the next 5 years.
Good deal.
So,
yeah. Well, man, that's great. And I like everything you said there. I definitely appreciate the overachiever, ambitious model there to keep you on your toes, to keep you from kind of settling into something that's mundane and just the same thing every day. That's good, solid advice there. All right, so one more question for you, Ryan, and I like to close out our podcast each episode when I have somebody on to talk about this and answer this question in summary. So, in your opinion, in your experience, what is your best experience or favorite part about raising pigs on pasture?
Well, I think that most people agree that bacon is the most rewarding part of raising pigs on pasture. But I can't speak for other people. I would say bacon is the most. I mean, there's all the peripheries that I've got this, regenerative cycle. There's so much stuff that we didn't even get into about the culture of farm to fork, and, just where do pasture pig farmers even fit into the whole new way of looking at, the slow food. I don't know how many different names there are for what people are doing out there.
Right.
But, they reward, there's so many different parts of being a pasture raised farmer of any kind, because you're not dealing with a tractor. You're not dealing with all this other craziness. It's you don't make as much money, but you don't spend as much money. So the great thing about raising pasture pigs is once you have a little bit of infrastructure built, you're kind of set. You don't have an overhead where these, big guys pay thousands of dollars per sow just to build their damn building. And then you've got to have the lights running and the heat on and the water on. Incredible amount of overhead to running a big operation, where pasture raised, I bet you for $1,000 worth of fence, I don't know what it takes to fence in a couple acres. I could figure it out, but it's not that much to put up a couple acres of fencing go get yourself a couple pieces of plywood. They're not as expensive as they once were.
Right.
And you can be raising hogs for relatively low investment if you're talking a business. Most people think of starting a business needing tens of thousands of dollars. I think that you could be profitable in pasture raising pigs for $10,000. And that would be, even if you had to go and buy a couple acres of land, I don't know, land's cheap in Wisconsin, you can get it for a couple $1,000s an acre if you're buying wooded stuff. But I think for $10,000, a guy could have an acre of pigs on pasture, including buying the acre of pigs. Or the acre and the pigs.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I love the model. I agree with you 100%. I think everything about that, the more agile and more mobile you can be, and the more that just helps you with overhead expenses, opens a door for leased land. There's so much that you could do with that. It's good stuff. Well, Ryan, if people want to learn more about your farm, where can they find you online?
Well, and until Facebook permanently blocks me, I'm on Facebook. Just Ryan Kolodziej, or there's a Facebook page for our farm, which is Epic Nature LLC, Perennial Gardens and Sustainable Agriculture.
Very good. I'll provide that information below in our show notes, people, so you can find that and provide those links so you can check him out on social media. Well, Ryan, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast. I see, looking at my timer here, we're an hour in, and I could easily ask you another hour's worth of questions, but maybe we'll table that, and maybe we'll invite you back on later if you're willing to come back later in the year and share some more of your wisdom with us.
Wisdom. No. If it wasn't so loud at a bar, we could do this down there. I'll talk pigs all night. Right.
I hear you. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on, and I thank you for your input, and hope you're not stuck in the car in the rain too long.
No, it's coming down. I don't know if you can hear it.
No, it actually sounds really, really good. I don't hear any background noise at all.
So you're on speakerphone now. I don't know if you can hear it now.
Yep. I can definitely hear it now. All right, man. Well, I pray you have a good evening. And again, appreciate you coming on.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Well, I really appreciate Ryan coming on the podcast. We've actually had a couple other calls since then. He and I have just talked off the record, I guess would be the way to put it, and really like what he's got going on up there in Wisconsin. There's several things that I think, again, that would benefit our podcast and our efforts, so we may have him back on to discuss some specifics and share some details with us. Along the same lines of the podcast, this is where I need some other feedback from you all. I don't know if you've noticed, hopefully, in this episode, the audio quality has improved. Now, I believe there's still room for improvement, and that may have to be a software upgrade, but at least we've stopped using landline. I've just had to bite the bullet, and I travel out about 45 minutes to a client's office to be able to utilize their high-speed internet and those type of things to use these services to make our podcast quality sound better. So I'm hoping it does sound better. There's still some volume things I'm trying to work out. When I edit this here on my computer, it seems like everything's balanced well, but then when I get in my truck and I listen to the podcast to see how you guys hear it, then I'm kind of like, that sounds a little quiet at some spots. So give me feedback if you would. Again, Troy@redtoolhouse.com would be very helpful to have some feedback to say, hey, yeah, your intros sound fine, or they're too hot, or your guests are too fuzzy, or they're not loud enough, whatever the case may be. But maybe use this one as a catalyst, because this is the format I'm going to use for a while, again, until we can get some high speed on the farm. All right. Well, enough of that. If you guys have any input, any suggestions, I've got a couple more interviews lined up, but I need about 4 or 5 more to get me through the holiday season, because I know not everybody wants to come on during the peak of Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I'd like to have some of those in the bank.
So give me a shout if you would like to come on the podcast. I really like it when you guys use the pre-screening form on the website. That's redtoolhouse.com/podcast, Pastured Pig Podcast. And that form just allows me to have some of those details in place, know what time zone you're in, know what time of day that you can do a call, that type of stuff, and really helps me schedule. So if you could use that form, let me know very basic information, but that helps me get my proverbial ducks in a row, or pigs in a row, I guess I should say. Well, I appreciate everyone listening, and as always, I pray you have a great week out in the pasture. All right, take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.